Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Spirituality Demystified, presented by Living Consciously. This is your host Supriya and also a fellow co-traveler in the spiritual journey. For today, we are discussing spirituality versus religion. And to help us in understanding what they are as well as demystifying the myths around them, we have with us our first guest, Mr. Hasnain Waris. Hasnain ji is the founder of the Self Seeker Group and the author of the book S for Sufi, A Beginner's Guide to Sufi Spirituality, which was published by the Hay House. He's trained in different modalities as well, including EFT and NLP. So, Hasnain ji, first of all, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us and helping us in this initiative. We are really grateful that you are here to share your knowledge and guidance with us today.
Thank you, Supriya, for inviting me on this show. And it's my pleasure to be here. Please go ahead with your questions and I will try to demystify whatever I can with the given capacity.
Okay. So, Hasnain ji, my first question is what is the definition of spirituality? How would you describe it?
To me, like spirituality is getting to the spirit of things, getting to the core of things. So it's a perspective through which you tend to go to the core of things and look at the essence of things, including yourself. So it's such a perspective, according to me. Like Kabir has somewhere said that my guru taught me that call earth a pind, a ball, and sarovar, pani. So pond is nothing but water in a circular form. If it becomes river, if it becomes say fountain, it doesn't take doesn't get anything new. It is same water taking different forms. So don't get confused by forms. Go to the spirit of things. So I think to me this sums up the purpose of spirituality.
Okay. So, since there is a very thin line between spirituality and religion, this line might seem blurry for those looking at it from a distance and can often be mistaken to be the same. So, how should one distinguish between the two?
Thin line, no line are again perspectives. If you ask me to give my view, I find all religions essentially spiritual in nature. So they are they were born as a spiritual quest, or if I can use a better word, they were born out of spirituality only, and later they grew to a certain level, and certain actions or certain rituals were repeated time and again, and they become mass cult or world religion at later stage. But if you look at the core of it, they started from individuals who were enlightened, be it Islam, be it Christianity, be it Buddhism. Just look around. So all these three religions, at least I can say, that they started from a single individual or few enlightened people who went on to become a founder of that particular religion, so to speak, at a later stage. And after thousands and thousands of years, we kind of forget that all that was essentially a result of a spiritual quest only in the beginning. So after all, if you see religion and spirituality, let's see them together. Their goal is to beautify humans and help them transcend their physical existence and avail higher perspective or intuitive capacities which otherwise remain unutilized within us. Don't you think?
Yeah.
So all religions are promising, or all spirituality, spiritual modalities, if that sounds better, are promising that only, you know.
Yeah.
So most of us keep on thinking that that we are just bodies. But if you ask me, like in Gita, it is mentioned that we are sukshma sharir, at the same time a sthul sharir, a material self, or and the subtle self, that you may call it psychological body. So we are like uh, two things, two capacities overlaid, you know. So waking up to your psychological self, which is essentially more dominant in case of humans compared to other creations. So waking up to that subtle self, or sukshma sharir, or the psychological self of yours, is the beginning of spiritual quest to me.
Wow. That was so great. So, can we say that they are quite interconnected, religion and spirituality?
I would say that every religion is essentially spiritual in nature.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That is really revealing, unrevealing. So, there's also a prevalent idea that practicality and spirituality do not go hand in hand. Can you shed some light on that matter?
Okay, this is a very interesting question. Most of the people think that being practical and being spiritual are
Are
almost
not very
opposite,
different.
you know.
Mm.
But by practical, I guess you mean being uh, relating more to physical, material, visible, logical. Is that what you
Mm.
mean?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Uh, and logically speaking, aren't our existence psychological too, as I mentioned in my last comment? Or
Yeah.
are we just material?
Yeah. Psychological as well.
Yeah, but is psychological self visible?
No.
Yeah. So this is where the dichotomy starts. We think that we are just bodies, but
Yeah.
you are psychology also. So
Mm.
what do we seek, if you see, from materials or material possession? Okay, the sense of fulfillment, the peace, right?
Mm.
Isn't it a subtle or invisible thing? That peace, that fulfillment, that sense of fulfillment, that ease, isn't it a very subtle and invisible thing,
Right. Mm.
and not a material thing?
Yeah.
And if I say that understanding your emotions uh, is a kind of intelligence,
Right.
and is it a
Mm.
practical and scientific thing according to you?
Yes, I think it is.
Oh, so you mean that emotional intelligence is something very scientific and practical, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let me reveal one more layer. Now, understanding the game of the intent, reading your own thoughts that are causing these emotions, where they are coming from, is spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, can you see the game here? The outcome of that is called being practical, but knowing the core of it, where the emotions are coming from, don't you think you are much more empowered and much more in control if you operate from that level?
Exactly.
And that is spirituality. So behind that so-called practical looking thing, you have one more capacity that is lying, and that is the spiritual center of you, or capacity, that gives birth to all these so-called practical actions. So the
Um,
art of seeing things as they are, without illusions, without beliefs, without conditionings, don't you think it is the most practical thing we can think of or do?
yes, it is.
So that is the
I think,
spirituality. That is
yeah,
being spiritual.
spirituality seem now that you've explained it, it seems like spirituality is actually so practical than we can think of at the surface.
Uh, I would say I have met many saints and half saints
Yeah.
in my life, and I found that they are the most practical people I have ever seen in my life.
Right.
They are more practical. I found them more practical than the CEOs, and the MDs that I
Mm-hmm.
have worked with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have often heard that spirituality is very surreal. So in order to be spiritual, does one has to abstain from various human experiences? Like it's very interconnected to the answer that you gave right now. It's so practical. So human experiences should not be excluded from that. But there is a myth that one has it since it's surreal, one has to abstain from human experiences. What do you think about it?
Okay. If you ask me, abstinence is a very tricky word. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, and holding yourself from certain experiences, I mean, you mean emotional charges or indulgence and all that. These are it is one of the methods to grow yourself spiritually. And in this part of the world, traditionally speaking, it's one of the most employed version, you know
Mm.
like
Yeah.
most of the saints talk about abstinence, but it has to be employed in a certain manner. Even indulgence is another way of spiritual growth
Mm.
that was employed by Osho. If you see, Osho talks about indulgence. When he
Yeah.
says Sambhog se samadhi ki or, he is talking about indulgence.
Mm.
But that depends on where the culture stands at that moment, who the target audience is. It depends on the patient, you can say, the kind of medicine you can prescribe. Both can ensure spiritual growth, but you have to be a master to take that call. Okay. So these are one of the methods, these two methods, abstinence at the same time indulgence. You know, they can be used and employed, but that depends on where the culture stands, what are the timings, and what is needed in that moment. By
Mm.
abstinence, I would not say that spirituality is something very surreal. It is very subtle, very soft, very fine. You
Yeah.
know,
Mm.
so yes, you have to come out of your gross material self and make yourself more sensitive, more fine in your perceptions, so that once what happens, if I take entire sensuality, actually sensual pampering is what we do most of the time.
Yeah.
All these five senses are being pampered, and we think that hedonism or pampering these senses is the goal of life, as it is
Mm.
being portrayed by the materialists right now. you know so getting above these sensual pleasures is something that helps you grow more subtle and more fine. So most of us are in the business of pampering our senses, and we think in the name of indulgence and all that, uh, we will get the happiness that we are seeking, but it is very counterproductive. It is very timely. बहुत क्षणिक ये pleasures होते हैं हमारे लिए, and we look for something lasting, something more fulfilling. We look for that joy, all that, but that is not in this space. The moment you are able to calm down your senses, or you don't get into the game of pampering these senses after a point, either by overindulgence or by abstinence, either way you start relating to that, craving for that indulgence, the desire to pamper these senses. You develop that capacity to look finer, and then your extra sensory perceptions, which are beyond these five senses, they take the precedence over these, and then they start flowering and growing, and that bliss can only be experienced, it can't be explained. you know
Yeah. And if I were to share my experience, I've been acquainted with people, I've connected to them, and they've actually shared their experience with spirituality and how it blends so well with their day to day lives in the little things that they do, how they describe the little instances where they could feel their spiritual selves in the day-to-day lives. It was really beautiful how spirituality blends so well in the little aspects of life.
So true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, last but not the least, how can we become more spiritually conscious? And what would you like to tell to people who are starting out on understanding spirituality and feeling anxious in the process?
Okay, so your question has two layers.
Yeah,
One, that these people are getting anxious beyond a point, and
yeah.
one is how can they grow spiritually, right?
For the beginners, it's for the
Yeah.
beginners who are starting their spiritual journey.
Okay. So I would answer the second portion, or the first question in your order first. Uh, by knowing your ego, so first of all, you have to acknowledge your egocentricity and the kind of game it is playing with you, the kind of sabotaging game. I call it enemy within. So uh, first you have to acknowledge the ego, know it, and then discouraging it bit by bit is what going to ensure your intuitive capacity grow gradually. You know, that's what. So the only thing that is blocking you from those finer spiritual experiences are actually your own egocentric, gross, habits, that slavery to tendencies, you know, that automatism, that like among Sufis, it's called the lower self. That
Yeah,
you are so captured by that lower self, which is not open to that higher understanding within you. So all the time it is taking grosser, decisions, inferior choices, and then suffering. So this is what most of us are, you know, caught in that vicious cycle that we want to break. So the only way to break it is to look at your egocentricity and then start working against it gradually. It is not something that you can master overnight. And the
mhm,
second part of your question uh, is that they are feeling anxious. Uh, but why do we feel anxious? That means that there is some greed, uh, spiritual greed in the background, which wants to get things faster. And if it's not getting faster, they get anxious, right?
yeah,
So in spiritual quest, it becomes very counterproductive, actually. Uh, I would like to share one small story, if you can allow me 2 minutes.
yeah, yeah. Of course, go ahead.
Okay. Once
Would love.
the disciple goes to, or the prospect goes to a guru and asks him, "Can you take me as a disciple?" And the guru watches him for the whole day, and the evening he says that, "Sorry, I can't take you right now." He said, "Ah, why can't you take me as a disciple? Don't
Mhm.
Isn't it your duty to take people as disciple and show them the right path? Why are you a guru then?" So he said, "No, I can't take. Oh, yes, that's my job, but I can't take you right now." So he said, "Why? I need explanation. I've come from such a distance not to hear this." So he said, "I look for a certain degree of restlessness in my disciple before I can take them on." He said, "But can't you see that thing in me?" He said, "Yes, but you have too much of it."
Yeah,
So can you see the anxiousness, the greed
yeah,
being counterproductive?
yes.
So instead of being anxious, I think that person needs to learn how to exercise patience. When things are not taking time, when things are taking time or working as you expect.
So patience is the key.
Yeah, beyond a point, patience becomes the key.
Wonderful. So that was really unrevealing. And spirituality is something that we define for ourselves. It's not something as complicated as it themes. That's what I can take from this session right now. And so, thank you so much, Hasnain for enlightening us. It is amazing and comforting to have people like you who are helping us in our spiritual journey.
Thank you, Supriya, for giving me this opportunity, and it's a pleasure. You're always welcome.
Okay, so dear listeners, that's all for today's episode on Spirituality Demystified podcast. We hope this helps you in ways more than we can imagine, but mostly in gaining clarity about spirituality versus religion. If you have any stories or doubts that you would like to share with us or be a part of our community, connect with us on our social media pages: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram by the name of Living Consciously with an extra Y for some extra love. Do join us again for more such enlightening discussions. Until then, goodbye.